All systems go. Clear for liftoff. What's up, everyone? Tyler Tamboline here, aka ToeTagginTambo, back for another edition of Leverage Lane here on the Ship It Nation YouTube station. Going to be talking all things PGA Championship. We've got major number 2. Excited for that. My guy Alex Blickle here with me as always. Going to break it all down, talk about the course fit. We have a huge Scottie conversation. Going to talk about the chalk build, how things have changed since our conversation on the Mayo show last week. I think that's important, especially with some of those value plays down low you'll want to tune in for. And then we'll talk, of course, about how we can leverage all of this and hopefully find our way to the top for $1 million. I had a really close call, Alex, at the Masters until I didn't, but it was still a 6-figure week that I'm excited about and bring it in. If you win 100K at the first major, you're obviously winning it at the second one too. So got to remember that. That's always the excitement. But how you do, my friend? Second major's here. We're back.
Yeah, and we're in Philly, so we're in my my hometown, especially of the golf world. I can't wait for this week. I can't wait to see Aronimink, and hopefully this is like as good as Aronimink can get. It might be a little bit soft, but it seems like the rough is at least thicker than Philly Cricket's rough was last year. So I'm really excited for that aspect of it, just to watch as a fan. And then I also think it's a fun DFS week. I'm curious your thoughts on the pricing. I know we talked about it a little bit with Pat, but do you like having this 5K range? Do you like the way the pricing is set up this week?
I'm okay with it. I don't know if I like or love it, but I will say that I do feel like I feel like there's an opportunity and people are going to make more mistakes because of it. They're not used to it. They're not ready for it. Doesn't mean I'll win because of that or will win because of that, but it is noteworthy that I think a lot of people struggle. And we're going to talk about some of those. We're going to abandon the comments from last week and the recaps and everything. It's a major week. We want to get fully focused on this one. So stay tuned for that. But I will say, I do think there's some thoughts, like little tidbits of information you'll hear people say. And I'm like, man, that could lead them to a mistake this week. And that could be good for us, keeping an eye on our stuff, reviewing lineups before we press enter. You're playing from the single entry perspective, but really think this pricing can help work to your advantage. It doesn't mean it will work, but as long as you feel good about the process going in. What are your first thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think there are pros and cons to it. I think the first con that I see to it is that it's really hard for anybody to build a bad lineup this week. We're like, man, it's just so, whether you want to build Scottie lineups or not, it's so easy to build lineups where all 6 players are really good golfers. So that aspect of it, I think, takes the edge away a little bit, where it's one of those weeks where like it's going to be really hard to outbuild people. You're actually going to have to outpick people, and that's the harder part of DFS. I think you and I both very much agree on that, especially like in NFL DFS. Is one of the things we stress all the time. Is like you can just outbuild the competition, and you're going to do really well without even trying to outpick the competition. It's a little bit hard to do that typically in PGA DFS, but this week I think that's especially true. And then the flip side of that, though, is I do think it's going to be a lot harder for the industry to get ownership right this week. And so, given how much time and energy I put into ownership, I do think this is one of those weeks where I can get a pretty strong ownership advantage, just because I think there are going to be guys that the field is surprised at how low owned they are. They're going to be surprised that certain guys get to like 25 or 30. They're going to, someone in this field is going to get to 30% owned, and the field's going to be like, how the hell did this guy get there? And hopefully I can at least somewhat see that sort of thing coming. And so I think that's where I'm really concentrated on this week from an advantage standpoint, is just, where is the field going to be wrong ownership wise? And that's not a terrible place to be, but it's not quite as strong of an edge as I think we often get when it's just like, man, for some reason the field is completely ignoring this entire 8K range and they're all really good players. So that's a little bit more advantageous than this, but this is still solid.
I got more on this later. You bring up some really good points there, and I think one of the main ones is I actually, especially for yourself, and I know it's why you called it an advantage, but someone who works strongly on the ownership and understands it, and combinatorial things, I think that you mentioned that we will talk about, that's a huge advantage, yes. But I actually don't think you'll do a bad job with it. But I will say, I don't care who is good at it or how good they are, and I'm worried about it even for our own side at Ship It Nation, et cetera, is there's opportunity for big mistakes to be made this week, in the sense of like, you thought it was going this way, it goes this way, it changes the dynamic completely. So we'll talk more on that when we get to how to leverage the chalk build. Before we get into the course, the conversation around there, I want to bring up, I like this one from Retail Ripper. Says, if you love free golf content, just click the like button. It helps them. I really like the follow-up, though. Tremendously bigly. It helps them. So yeah, do us a favor. If you're watching this live as you are right now, if you're even on mobile, you just click the X on the chat for 2 seconds, click the thumbs up, bring it back. It does help us tremendously bigly. And I got to bring this up, Alex. I just let everybody know it is our 3rd birthday at Ship It Nation this Friday. And I'm always working on those one-liners. So the Ship It Nation celebration from marketing perspective, we're turning 3, join for free. If you go to the site, no code required. You just go to shipitnation.com. Very easy to do. When you get on the page, it's right at the top. You click that banner. It will take you in. It's free for a week. It's like any other trial. You got to enter your stuff. You can cancel at any time. Try it out, though, but you can get right in the Discord. You can get access to everything we've got to offer. And there is another additional add-on. Someone was looking for a breakdown in the chat. We're not going to do it. I'll do a quick version of it now. But with the Stone 2.0, where you guys saw us go fully, optional to, you can find just the pivots. You can have, this is last week's data, by the way, but just noting it, you can have everything you need in one place. We did add an official lineup hand builder. So I know people like messing around with this, and on future shows, maybe we bring it in live just as we'll have more accurate numbers and the up-to-date data and all that. I'm bringing a beta thing, and it's not even live for our members yet, but it's a free week. You get to try this out. It will have everything you need on there where you could set it up. So if I clear the lineup, for example, here, turn off the lock first, clear it, you can bring in, and it's a true hand builder, but you can start to see like, okay, if I go Tommy, this is last week again, Sam Burns, Woodland, you'll have just like a standard site would have on an optimizer. So even if you don't have a SaberSim, an optimizer package, something like that, you can clear the lineup, you can optimize it and see what the highest projected lineup is, what the ownership on each player is, how it all shakes out, the cap used, etc. So no full preview here today, guys. Want to get right to the content. And like I said, stick around. There's going to be more that we go through. But I do think that this is just another key add-on over at shipitnation.com. And if you saw it when I had it up there on screen, that is under the Stone 2.0. Again, just go there, click free, get in. You can join the Discord right away. You'll get Stone 2.0, all the other stuff we offer, the showdown content, but it's all access. You'll get the NBA playoffs. You'll get the MMA slate this weekend. You'll get the NHL playoffs. You get MLB daily, all that stuff. So you can check us out on shipitnation.com. All right, Alex, that's the promo. Bring it back to the hometown here. Speaking of hometown, you talked about it. By the way, I'm trying to go the whole show without having to say the name of the course. I can never say it right. So I'm glad you busted it out one time already. But talk to us about this course. We'll get to the DFS stuff. We'll get to the pricing, how it all shapes out together. But first up, people want to know weather, course, the length. Rory's comments today outside of his blister on his toe and quitting after 3 holes and Collin Morikawa's back he's talking about. But the course, Rory said there's like no strategy here. Just bomb it out there and see how it goes. But talk to us about this course. You're from the area, so let us know.
Yeah, I actually don't think that Rory's correct in his assessment of the course. And it's interesting because he made very similar comments almost a year ago to the day about Philadelphia Cricket Club. And he ended up finishing, I think it was 7th, but like he was never in contention. And guys who played the course a little bit differently than he did had more success. And so I do think he's a little bit wrong in that regard. And it's interesting because like half of what he said, when he talked about the greens and he talked about how the greens are the test of this golf course, he was 100% correct. It's just he makes a different conclusion about how to get there and how to actually strategize around the greens than I would, and then I think most players are kind of making, which is the key to understand about this golf course is that the greens are, I wouldn't call them like huge by any means, but they play significantly smaller than their actual areas because they've got spines running all throughout the greens. And it's kind of a signature of Donald Ross, but even he has said, when I go back to Aronimink, I realize like this is my crown jewel. This is the ultimate Donald Ross golf course. And it's largely because of these green complexes. And so what these spines end up doing is they create very segmented greens. And so when you're hitting towards a pin, ordinarily, if you hit a shot to 15 feet, you hit it to 15 feet. If you hit it to 12 feet, you hit it to 12 feet. If you hit it to 25 feet, you hit it to 25 feet. But on these greens, it could be the case that like if you hit it to 15 feet, you get into the correct segment and it funnels to the hole and it's a 10-foot putt. If you hit it to 18 feet, you're on the wrong side of the spine. It rolls out to 25, 30 feet. And now, even though you're somewhat close to the flag, your putt goes way up a hill, way down a hill, breaking hard to the right, and you just have absolutely no chance at actually making that. And suddenly, even though you're 25 feet from the hole, it's a tough 2-putt. So you have to be like super, super precise coming into these greens to get scoring opportunities. When you miss these greens, you have the potential to miss in areas where it's going to be impossible to get the ball close on your chip shot, or you can miss in a similar area and it's a really straightforward up and down. And so all of this is to say, like, I think there's going to be a massive emphasis on approach play this week, a de-emphasis on around the green play, an emphasis on accuracy off the tee, not distance, which is where I really disagree with Rory. And the cool thing is I kind of came to that conclusion, number one, just from knowing the course and from playing the course like 20 times on the Sims over the last few months. It's like the only course I've played on Sims anytime I've been on them, just to get a sense for this week, just because I'm so damn excited for this week. But so I came to this conclusion about like how I expect the course to play. And then I thought, okay, well, let me test what the course fit model says for like all Donald Ross courses on the PGA Tour. And it's exactly that. You see a spike in accuracy, you see a big spike in approach play, and you see a massive decline in the predictive value of around the green play. And so I think Aronimink is going to be the typical Donald Ross course, a little bit on steroids. And that gets to exactly what I just talked about.
Damn, you got me fired up, man. Like just talking about the crown jewel of his stuff and everything that he puts together. Like everyone always thinks again, I've been part of this as well. So I'm saying everybody, I would definitely fall in this class, like the PGA Championship, the worst major, no juice, whatever. I get it. You're not going to compare to the Masters, the U.S. Open. I love the U.S. Open, by the way, and I'm Canadian, so that tells you everything you need to know. The Open, the cool part of like the courses and getting to stay up late and, watch it through the night and have all these different factors. Yeah, there's always a reason that the PGA Championship comes in last. But maybe the gap's just not as much as it usually is this year when you get a course this exciting, the full field, everything that's going on in the golf world with Liv and PGA and the interviews of like Rahm can't even answer the questions because it's like, that's for me to know. It's like, okay, buddy, we get it. Like things like that. But it just does make it that much better. Bryson being in the investment meetings, he's saying going forward, like, are you going to buy Liv with your YouTube money? Like, who knows what's going to happen? But just the length did come up. So that's why, you hit on it a lot there. But was there anything to this? Because Ren said, he had to run, but longtime member over at Ship It Nation, always supporting. We appreciate him. Says, my question is, what makes this course long? There are 5 out of 12 par 4s over 455 yards, which doesn't even seem very long. Is it fully a misconception? It's just like the length is the length, or is it like something else to this that you want to add on?
I would say that it isn't long. It's not a long golf course. It's going to be a lot like Philly cricket, where I think I played the Philadelphia Open at this course probably 10, 11 years ago, something like that. And I actually remember when I played it, I was 40 pounds lighter and I hit the ball 40 yards shorter than I do now. And I remember thinking, like, walking around the golf course, like, man, this is a long, difficult course. But I'm sure that if I went back and played it today, that I wouldn't feel that way. And it's also similar to cricket in the sense that, like, if you play the Pennsylvania Open there, a quarter of the field can take the bunkers out of play on a lot of the tee shots. Same thing here, except it's a quarter of the field can't when you get to a PGA Tour event, when you get to the PGA Championship. And so it's not that the long guys have an advantage. It's that the shortest of the short guys might have a disadvantage because of the length. But, and I think Michael Kim put a tweet out this morning where he said, like, the carry number you need is 285. The vast majority of tour players, especially the ones that we're considering actually playing, have 285 very easily in their bag. Russell Henley might be like the only really, really good player who consistently can't carry his ball 285. And so I don't think the distance of the course, I don't think the length off the tee is going to be a huge factor. The only way that it would is if it gets really soft, really cold, really windy, and some of the key holes with the key carries are into the wind. But it doesn't look like we're going to get quite that.
Do you have anything else to add on weather? Since we're on that topic, I'll bring this down just to clarify. I mean, that was a perfect segue. I was going to ask that next, and you already kind of said it. Do you see anything with weather that concerns you, even if we don't bring it up right now or anything? Is there anything from that perspective that you're thinking of?
I mean, it's something where, like, at the moment, I would say it's just something we need to monitor. There's nothing like overly obvious that we need to talk through. One thing I do notice, like, as I look through the forecasts, is there was about a week ago when I looked at the initial forecasts, and up through the last few days, it did look like there was going to be a pretty considerable amount of rain Wednesday night into Thursday morning, which could really soften the course. Right now, I'm seeing a lot less than what was initially forecasted. That would be awesome if that actually comes to fruition, because it means the course will play a lot firmer. The other thing, if you recall, from Philly cricket last year is the day that it played significantly harder than the other days. Day one was kind of its own thing where there was no wind whatsoever. It was warm. They put all of the pins, like literally 15 of the 18 pins in the easiest location possible on the greens. I don't know what they were thinking with that. And so they played really easy. But then there was one day where it played particularly hard and it was a lot cooler. There was some rain, but it was the coolness, the north wind, and it looks like we're getting that. So when guys are teeing off early Thursday morning, it's going to be low 50s. Doesn't get higher than 64 on Thursday. Friday, guys are going to tee off in the upper 40s. It doesn't get higher than 67 in the afternoon. There's going to be a lot of wind on Friday. So yeah, I think at least Thursday, Friday, we could see some pretty difficult conditions. And then it does warm up and the wind looks like it's going to die down on Saturday. And then it'll be very, very warm Sunday. But hopefully by that time, the course is like really firm. And now the heat is actually making it play even firmer and tougher. So as of right now, the forecast looks as good as it has in the last couple of weeks in terms of making Aronimink a really good test.
Yeah, and I think a couple key points too, outside of the weather, but just some of those factors that you mentioned that lead to these major weeks. And when people get so confused about, like you mentioned, like the Russell Henley thing, it's like, yeah, but the guy's used to coming in from these longer iron shots. It's one of his specialties. Oh, and then it gets firm. Yeah, he's often playing. He's been around for many years when courses get firm. And that's why you see guys like him and Hideki and Lowry and Sungjaes and those guys of the world that, like, yeah, they over the weekend, they just find their way up the board and you're like, oh, here comes Harris English again. That guy, how does he still do this? Here's Brian Harman. It's like, it's literally what they've done their whole life. It's their profession. Like, everyone's professional, but I'm saying when people get so shocked by that, it's like, well, I thought it was going to be bombers. I thought it was going to be this. It's like this. A lot of these guys can still, they're bombers to you, buddy. In most cases, like, that's first of all. And it's like the draw of like a 300-yard player and like a 330. Like, yeah, there's a huge difference, but 300 still plays, and 285 is all you need, like, say, from carry. It's like these guys are still going to be in the mix. They might be 40. Look at the year. I was talking about with my dad about this the other day about, like, remember Bryson versus Lee Westwood at API with the big Bryson thing, and boom, it's like, yeah, he was, what was he, 80 yards ahead of Lee Westwood? How many holes did that take before Bryson could finally finish it? It's like Lee kept up just fine. Yeah, I'll be 50, 60, 80 yards back, whatever, but I'm very comfortable in this spot, and then I'll play the rest of the hole. And you got to do your job still too. And if you don't, and everyone's all, but it's easier for them. Not always. They're not always the best iron players if they're the longest player off the tee. So different skills required for different things. Anything else you want to add on that? If not, we can keep it moving.
Well, yeah. So let's think about Henley for a second. Like, one of the holes where he's going to have a disadvantage off the tee is the back nine par 5. And when you look at the back nine par 5, you'll see why. There's a fairway bunker left side of the fairway. It's a slight dog leg left. The longer and even the average distance players in the field are going to take it over that bunker. They're going to cut that corner a little bit, and they're going to have, 200 to 240 yards in or something like that for their second shot into the par 5. Henley's not going to be able to take on that bunker. He's going to have to play around the bunker to the right side, maybe even leave his drive short of the bunker. But it's not a huge deal for him because that means his second shot is just a layup inside of 100 yards where he's one of, if not the single best players on tour from that range. So that when he gets to that tee box, yes, he knows that it might be a 3-shot hole for him. Maybe he thinks he can get there, with a 3-wood when everyone else is hitting 6-iron into the green or something like that. But he's still standing on that tee thinking, I'm going to make a birdie here because I'm going to put a wedge in my hand from the fairway from 80 yards, and I'm going to get that up and down 6 times out of 10 or something like that, right? So he's still going to be scoring on those holes. It's not like that takes him out of the hole and means he has to play for par when everyone else is playing birdie. So yeah, I don't see length being a big variable at all this week. The one thing I'll say about that is PGA championships as a whole have emphasized distance, and that could be something to do with just the setup and the rough. Again, I don't see that happening this week, but if it does happen, I'm not going to be shocked by it. And I know that, like, DataGolf found distance to be predictive the last time the tour was at Aronimink in 2018. My numbers didn't find that, and it's rare that we differ, but that can also happen when you just have like a 1-year sample size that's not reliable at all. And again, I then point to just all Donald Ross courses not having that distance signal. So I'm pretty confident in my read of the course this week, and that it's going to be accuracy over distance, not because you really gain an advantage with accuracy compared to distance, but because if you're gaining with accuracy, you're putting yourself in position to gain with approach play, and that's where the money's going to be made this week.
I agree. That's where, I mean, we're fully aligned on that to start. We'll see how it shapes out when we get to our leverage lane at the end and some of the other stuff, but definitely see that as a potential way, because I'm very curious to see now. I don't know if you have any other sort of topics you want to hit on. We're definitely gonna have the Scottie conversation, but it kind of bleeds into the conversation. And actually there's some questions in the chat I might hit in a second too, but it definitely bleeds into the conversation of the chalk build. And I've built it a few different ways, but it always seems to lead back to Scottie. Like there's always a way to get to Scottie. Yeah. And so I do think we end up seeing like 30 to 40. I'm wondering right off the top, before we have that conversation, maybe I'll hit some of these questions first, just quickly. Do you see Scottie 30 to 35, or do you see Scottie 35 to 40 plus? What's more in $25 Millie Maker? Let's use as an example.
Yeah. My numbers say 25 to 30. My brain and instinct coming into the week says 40 plus. So that's going to be something that like I'm going to be battling throughout the next day and a half, trying to figure that out. And the main conversation I want to have with you today about ownership is not trying to predict Scottie by thinking about how the field feels about Scottie, but trying to predict Scottie's ownership based on how does the field feel about the value plays that would need to come in higher owned than they're currently projected in order to get Scottie from 30 to 40%. So like right now, we've got him at 26.5%, 31% in single entries. Siwoo Kim is the highest owned value play at 23% in single entries. Then Nikolai's at 20%. What do those guys have to get to? And then what does the secondary chalk have to get to in order for Scottie to actually be 40 the way my brain and my gut is kind of telling me he will be?
Yeah, and I think you said for single entry, somebody asked, I think you've got him closer to 30 in something 31. Like 44, 44, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't done the high stakes ownership yet. High stakes ownership will be done tonight after baseball and NBA lock. Well, actually NBA is only one game. So after MLB locks, I'll be diving into the ownership update, including the first run of the high stakes ownership. But I would guess that he's higher in high stakes than in single entries. I think what the high stakes players are going to realize more than the casual players is that whereas throughout this season, the main reason to not play Scottie hasn't been that Scottie's been struggling. It's been that Scottie lineups didn't have enough upside in the other five players. But with this pricing, with the 5K range, and with guys like Nikolai Højgaard at $6,500 when he belongs in the 8,000s,
yeah,
it's so much easier to build a lineup with Scottie where all six guys in the lineup are actually good. They can all contend when they play really, really well instead of, I've got three guys whose ceiling is a T20. So I think that's what high stakes players are going to realize. And that's why I think his high stakes ownership will be higher than single entry and higher than MME ownership this week.
Yeah, the Højgaard conversation, he's one example, but he'll come up in the sort of leveraging the chalk build conversation. I think that's where people, if he's going to be this, I'm out. It's like, you absolutely do not have to be out on him. You have to be cognizant of what you're building from there, but there's a thing as being like underpriced. And if you find a way to use it to your advantage, it could work out in that way. So definitely want to bring that up. Stat brought it up too. Like DataGolf is predicting distance to be a predictor this year too. It's down on accuracy, up on distance. The Rory comments, things like that. To me, it just says, like, again, how it actually plays, we'll find out. But it's definitely in the game we play, which is what matters here. And talking about DFS and how it's moving the field, there is that sort of, some of it's natural by price, but some of it's also by these conversations and these things people see, that it's just naturally going to be baked into the projection. People use DataGolf projections. That's going to push it that much more. And then now they will become higher owned because of that. Whether it's right or wrong, we'll find out.
I could be wrong about this, so don't completely take my word for it, especially if DataGolf has put something out about this or they have a methodology somewhere on the site. But I believe that they are not actually making a prediction about how it's going to play this year, and that their course fit model, where they talk about like what's going to be predictive this year, is literally just a measure of what has been predictive in the past, which is typically how my course fit model works as well. But because I view this week as one where we don't have enough data, I'm then putting in my own manual thoughts and kind of changing things and actually making a prediction about how it's going to play. And so I think like if you spoke with some of the DataGolf guys, I think that's what they would tell you. Again, I don't know that for sure. I also know that like I think they do some comp course stuff, but I think their comp course stuff is based on the predictive weights that they have found. So like if they find driving distance more predictive than driving accuracy, they're basing the comp courses on other courses where distance is more important than accuracy. So it's not like they're identifying similar golf courses and then blending those weights where some of the similar golf courses might be, accuracy over distance. It's like those weights are literally what is determining what is a comp course for them. So I don't think it's them predicting that that's going to be this year. I think they're just telling you what has been the case here in the past, according to their.
I've got it up here. So just to get your take on it, it says the value of each attribute at the time of a tournament is equal to a weighted average of historical performances. Mm-hmm. For example, the driving distance attribute is a weighted average of past driving distance performances. It is the predictive power of this weighted average on performance that we are estimating.
Yep.
That's what it states for how to interpret the radar plot that they put on their course fit page that you'll see people post out there and be like, oh, this is exactly what's going to happen. And then it's not always the case. And again, guys that can drive the ball long typically do well in golf tournaments. It's never a bad thing. Sometimes people get there by accident. Sometimes people force it with a skill stack, whatever it might be, but definitely love that point that Stat made and something worth talking through. All right, let's talk about this then. Do you want to talk chalk build first or just focus on Scottie and how it ties into that? Because they're kind of going to be both the same in my opinion, but however you want to start it, I'm good with.
Yeah. So let's talk about the decision at the top, I think, to start, because it is possible to build like Scottie plus Fitzpatrick or something like that. Like you can build that type of lineup, but I think the vast majority of the field is choosing between Scottie and lineups that have 2 to 3 of this upper 9K, low 10K range. And one of the points that we made like backstage is it's actually interesting that Rahm and Bryson and all of the studs are playing this week, because we've had a bunch of weeks lately where either Scottie or Rory hasn't been there, or Morikawa hasn't been there, or Oberg wasn't there. And so we've had like a number of weeks in a row with these really strong signature event fields where the top has been super compacted, and we've seen 25, 30, 35% ownership on this like Cam Young, Xander Schauffele, Matt Fitzpatrick type range. And we're very unlikely to get that this week. But that doesn't mean that people aren't still hammering this range. It's just that there are more guys in this range. Now there's Bryson and there's Rahm, and all the guys are here. And you can still go to Rory, who's in this no man's land at 12-4. So I think the decision is mostly Scottie or multiple of the 9 and 10K guys. And this is going to be a difficult decision, but I think like there are two main factors in terms of how owned does Scottie get, and neither I don't think are related to him specifically and how people feel about him. I think the first is how confident are people that Cam, Fitzpatrick, that group of players is just going to continue to play lights out, and in which case you want those guys because they're winning tournaments and not just finishing second to Scottie. And then second is how does the field feel about the 7K range and the 6K range? How comfortable are people playing Højgaard at really high ownership? Does anyone want to go into the 5K range for Fitzpatrick and Hall and McCarty, or are people more inclined to build the balanced lineups? So it's a really interesting conversation, and I can't wait to kind of work through the whole thing, because I don't have a strong sense yet what people are actually going to land on, and I'm hoping that an hour from now that I have a much better sense of, okay, yeah, I do need to bump Scottie to 40%, or I do need to keep Scottie here at 30%, no matter what my gut says.
Yeah, the biggest part is, what you always talk about, and I think Stat just put it in the chat. I was about to say it about like the combinatorial, like the Højgaard thing is just clear, right? Højgaard is 6,500. He's become the runaway. He's the guy that people are used to seeing at 8K. You mentioned it yourself, probably should be at that this week. Like, just look at every angle, and that would make sense. There'll be tons of people out there that'll run to, no, I think this guy, or I think that. I don't care. It's literally the difference in like a small percentage on those guys you're talking about. And at the end of the day, it's more about the concept, not about the play, not about the specific number, all of that. It's just breaking it down from a overall perspective. Højgaard will be more popular than everyone down there. That's what's happened since Thursday or Friday, whatever it was, when we jumped on with Mayo. We were more in that upper 5K range. But by the way, you got to fill out with 6 guys. So it's like the minute you say, okay, well, I actually think it's going to be, I'd be shocked. I think Harry Hall, or who's the guy down there, the like Alex Fitzpatrick I saw was brought up today. Okay, Let's say he gets to 7. That very well could happen. Sure. But like you can easily play Fitzpatrick and Højgaard together. So that's the next piece of the conversation. But It's no secret that like Højgaard with Scheffler should be popular. And then if you're going to the Højgaard version that doesn't have Scottie, it's very easy to figure out that of the Cam Youngs and the Obergs and the like whoever else you go to, Fitzpatrick, Rahm, who people like to play at majors and you'll feel good about or whatever, like that. That's an example. That's the alternate version of it. But Højgaard is in both of them. And Højgaard's going to be a part of the conversation that anchors the Scottie conversation because, to your point, there is like a chalk version right now of the Scottie lineup that is random. But just to give an example, something that looks like Scottie, Keegan, Ricky, Højgaard, and then a couple 6K guys, whether it's like, if you like Yella, by the way, Yella never gets ownership until he does. And then you're like, holy shit, this guy like doubled. But it's like, there's things like that. There's versions like that will pop up. But after that, it's like, what's the other way you can look at this? Obviously, that's when we get to sort of leveraging the chalk build. But even within the chalk build, you mentioned it. What's the Scottie build that also includes the 9K guy or the 8K guy or whatever? Because that's really the tricky here. In the 9Ks, Oberg, sure. But then Morikawa, talking about his back today. Mm-hmm. Fleetwood, who people don't really love, but he might get a little bit of secondary, but nobody's going to want what? Hovland, Rose, JT, Brooks, Sadecki, Hatton, Reed. The ownership can show them all at 7 to 10%, but first of all, they won't all be that. You'll have more accurate, like you said, be looking at it from that perspective. I know we will as well, but they're going to get overlooked for sure. Maybe Ludwig. But do people go to that? Do you think that's a possibility? Like where obviously it's going to happen some. I'm talking about from the chalk version, the Scottie, Ludwig, Højgaard, which is the best way to start this thing off, only leaves you 6.6K, and you got to fill out 3 spots.
Well, so this to me is why it's such an interesting conversation, because if you start Scottie and Nikolai, it's 7,400 for the next 4 spots. The problem that people are going to have with this type of lineup is not finding 4 guys in this range that they like. It's going to be very easy to find 4 guys around $7,400 per player that you like. The problem for most people is going to be that if you start this way and you just play 4 guys that you like around $7,400, you are not playing Bryson, Rahm, Cam, Xander, Fitz, Morikawa, Oberg, Fleetwood, right? Like this huge list of players that the field has loved playing over the last few months and has been given every reason to continue playing them basically in the last few weeks as well. So if people then want to get up higher, let's say they start Scottie and Nikolai, but they still really want one of those 9, 10K guys. And so they want to get Fitzpatrick in there. Well, now you're left with 65.33 per the last 3 spots, which means you probably have to dip once minimum in the 5K range. And so to me, like when we think about, okay, whose ownership needs to change the most if between I'm predicting Scottie at 30% or I'm predicting Scottie at 40%. And to me, it's the guys in this 5K range, 6K range, and then someone in the 7s. But like even Nikolai Højgaard, whether Scottie's 30 or 40%, Nikolai's going to be a very chalky play. He's going to be a popular play. If Scottie's 40% instead of 30, like that to me could mean that Norin, Yella Miraju, both of those guys are at like 6-7%. Harris English 8% right now for me. Rayton 9%, Smalley 9%. Those guys need to go way up. Instead of being 6, 7, 9, they need to be 12 to 15, 18%, something like that. The guys in the 5K range, Fitzpatrick 7%, Hall 6%, McCarty 7%, Nick Taylor 5%. Those guys are going to be 10 to 15 if Scottie gets to 40%. So like that to me is where the big shift comes in. And I think it's going to be really important to get that right in whether or not you actually want to play Scottie and whether playing Scottie is the right strategy or not. To me, it's going to be really important to get that right. And that at least excites me from an ownership standpoint, because that's the puzzle that I love solving.
Right. And it excites me as well. Obviously, my lane is locked in already, so I'll get more on that at the end. But I will say one interesting part of this conversation is like, it's a math problem. You're reverse engineering. And then you're having to put a little bit of like, I know everyone talks about, IKB, I know better. And some people change, I know ball, but it's like, realistically, it's I know DFS. And like in this situation and knowing the sport and tying it together can be helpful. Does the Rory toe thing deter enough people? I don't think so. So that's just my opinion from playing this game the long time. And I'm not going to do them all, but I'm going to do some. Is Bryson going to be super popular? I don't know, but it's also the only chance people get to play him. So I think it's clearly Scottie, Gap, Rory, Gap, Bryson. I think Rahm and Cam Young will definitely get more than Bryson. I mean, I can figure that much out. And this is just doing the top quickly. I don't know if Xander and Fitzpatrick will actually hold on those numbers. Projections will only do so much with those price tags on those guys, 10K and 10-1 and a little bit of love, but they're still in that Bryson range. Like how that shakes out, whatever. But what I do feel very confident in is Ludwig, Fleetwood, and maybe Brooks or something. Like, I don't know. Like these are just small numbers. After that, it's like nobody. In the 8K range, anybody? Spieth, the Grand Slam conversation, maybe like a 10-12, right? Like these just seem like, okay, so nobody wants those guys for the exercise. Okay, I feel good about that. The 7K range, sure, there's, like we talked, maybe a little Spawn, a little Siwoo, Minwoo.
I think there's going to be a lot of Siwoo at 79.
I agree for sure.
That's a blatant misprice. I will push back a little bit up top. I think both Rory and Bryson are going to be lower owned than all of Rahm, Cam, Xander, Fitz.
The Rory conversation is separate then, because I want to table that for a second. It's good when we have a bit of a debate. So let's go back to that. My concept though that I was getting to, and you're right on the Siwoo part, and I even see like Keegan and whatever, and we know Højgaard, but where I'm thinking people are confusing it, like seeing some of this stuff, is like a lot of ownership will just get thrown like 4% here and 5% there and 6% there, and it's like, man, those could all be like 2 to 3%ers. In some cases. So what you actually, part of your exercise should be, and it's not for us to tell you, we're giving you our concepts and thoughts and you can go put your own spin on it. But like, how much do you really like Goddard and Henley and Lowry and Bobby Mack and Griffin and the things that you'd be leaving off? Like, you got to think about that. How much do you really like Hatton, Reed, JT, Rose, Hovland, Kawa, Fitz? How much do you really like those? If you really think there's something there, the Scottie lineups really just can't get to those very easily. So that's where you'd be able to overtake, and you could actually still build with a Rasmus or whoever your choice is down low. So I said Rasmus, apologies, Nikolai, and just going there. Someone said earlier they're playing Rasmus instead, and I get that concept. Like I get it, but I haven't seen it as like the talent right now. Well, again, we're talking about anything can happen in a golf week, but just from that perspective. Now let's go back. I think when the week started, I guess I should say it like more when the content cycle started and the pricing came out, we were one of the first on it with Mayo, yourself and me on Friday it was, or whatever we recorded it. I think there was a potential that, it was basically setting up where like Rory was going to be really low owned. I thought people would come around on him a little bit more, not because of the $1,500 savings, but more just because of coming into the week. I guess the reason I said table it, we might debate it a little, is just because now with the toe and quitting the practice round and how easy it is to get to Scottie and how many people are excited about all these plays down low to make Scottie work. Is that where you're thinking it is? It's like people are either going to drop to Rahm, Young, one of them, mixing them, whatever, or just go up to Scottie. Is that what you're seeing?
Well, so put it this way. Like, I think building Rory lineups is too similar to building Scottie lineups and too dissimilar from building the more balanced lineups for people to really land there, because it's just like, if you start Rory Fitz, for example, it's 6,900 per player in the remaining 4 spots. So you're still very limited, even though you have 2 studs. If you start instead, Cam Young, Fitzpatrick, you're left with 7,450 per player. Now you can find 4 guys that you really, really like. So it's so different to build a Rory lineup than a non-Rory lineup. And it's kind of similar to build a Scottie lineup and a Rory lineup, where again, I see him slipping through the cracks. And then I also think that Bryson being significantly more expensive than Rahm, Cam, Schauffele, Fitzpatrick, like, why would people not just play the guys who have been playing so incredibly well instead of the guy who missed the cut at the Masters, withdrew in Mexico while playing horribly, and then kind of got it together again in Virginia, but people aren't even paying that much attention to that. And so we just haven't seen it from Bryson the way we have seen it from all these other guys, where, sometimes we get to a major championship and it's nice to have Rahm and Bryson. People are really excited to play those guys because the superstars, the guys you're paying up for, haven't done anything crazy. And so like now you're actually saying, okay, I can get more win equity from these guys. That's not the case right now. Like the 10K range is playing phenomenal golf from the typical PGA Tour players. So I think the field is really going to prefer those guys at a discount compared to Bryson.
So I will say this then, because I agree with all that now that we've talked it through. So I'll say this, now that you've said that though, doesn't that just, put the nail in the coffin? Like, it's Scottie. because at the end of the day, when you knock down Rory that much, you knock down Bryson that much, I still already have guys like Cam Young and Rahm at 20 plus already, thinking that if you really are going to knock it off, those is Cam Young? I guess my point would be, when you go with those guys, you end up with the lineups of like all these lower owned 8K and 9K and whatever else you want to do. Like, even if you put Erasmus in there, it's not really like, you could easily find your way back to Scottie. So it's going to come down to that. So at the end of the day, I start to feel a lot more confident in the fact that Scottie's just going to be really steamed up even further than we thought, because now that you have that Rory take, and I agree with it now, it's like that would make me think even more Scottie just from that perspective.
And this is why I think this is such an important conversation. Because, like, let me tell you where I have everybody right now near the top, and we can kind of go from there. But so single entry ownership: Scottie 31, Rory and Bryson 9, Rahm 15, Cam 18, Scheffler and Fitzpatrick 17, Morikawa 10, Fleetwood 10, Oberg 16. We'll just stop there.
Okay.
We are talking about Scottie potentially being 40 instead of 31%. And I already have like this group of phenomenally playing golfers: Rahm, Cam, Xander, Fitz, Oberg, not even at 20%. So if Scottie gets to 40, like, to me, either I'm right about these other guys and they're not getting to 20%, and the build is pretty clear. You play like 2 or 3 of these guys who are in phenomenal form, and then you go pick your favorite 7 and 8K guys and you're done. Or those guys also have to get up to 20, 25% in addition to Scottie potentially going up. And now, like, somebody or some group of players down in the value range that I'm currently projecting between 5 and 10%, I need to bring like a bunch of these guys way up. So do you think I'm low on this 9 and 10K range?
Not necessarily. I think you're high on Xander and Fitz.
Okay.
Because for everything you said, like everything that actually turned out to make perfect sense in my brain of like what you mentioned about Rory and Bryson, it's the same to me on the bottom. And it's like, I get it. Like, didn't we just see it? What was last week's Delta? What was Fitz versus Cam Young last week? Or we had these conversations about like Xander versus Fitz and all that. And I even, I remember talking about that. It's like, I just don't see how if they're 17, then yeah, I think Scottie does stay slightly in check, and they're like the next tier up to the Rahm Youngs. But I actually think Rahm and Young would eat more of their lunch and they would come down a little bit. And then some of that would also go back up to Scottie. Go ahead.
Well, I think the Fitzpatrick point's really interesting. I think one of the reasons why he was lower, and I'm getting the actual ownership from this past week. So we had Rory 39. This is from the $200 single entry, which is the contest that I do the single entry ownership trying to project. So Rory was 39, Cam was 29, Scheffler was 38, Fitzpatrick was 16. So I see what you're saying there, where we just had this instance of Fitzpatrick like being well below these other guys. But I think that was largely because people knew with certainty that Quail Hollow is a bomber's course. Now, I think it's a bomber and a distance course where like you really get the full benefit from being both accurate and long off the tee. But the field was very much in on bombers, which is why Fitzpatrick, I think, fell below that other group of players who all just hit the crap out of the ball. I don't think the field is in on the bomber narrative anywhere near the same degree this week as they were last week, which is why I think Fitzpatrick can close that ownership gap with those guys. But I do see your point, but I think I'm not even so much worried about like whether I'm right about Fitzpatrick. It's more, am I right about the like average ownership about this group of players that the field really likes? So even if you take him out, if we just had a conversation of what is the average ownership of the 3 highest owned players between $9,500 and $10,400, do I need to get that average up over 20%, or is that, highest end average good between 15 and 20?
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, like, and again, I don't know the answer. That's why it's your expertise, but I'll say like the part there, the other thing is Ludwig as well. Mm-hmm. I think you could flip Ludwig and Fitz for whatever you have and do that too.
I mean, I have them almost identical. I've got Oberg at 16%. Last week he was 24%. So he didn't get as much of the bomber credit as the other guys, but he played pretty well again, especially on Sunday. So
because
I very much agree. I think he's going to be in that collection of popular, upper 9K, low 10K guys.
And so my whole point would be, and again, better to tie this together from the ownership and the math perspective, but just from my, putting 2 cents onto this is like, it's more to me, it wasn't even about the Fitz point as much as like, in my eyes, it's Scottie, and then it's Rahm, Young, Xander, and then Ludwig, full stop, like 9K and up. Like that's the 4 guys that absorb the ownership. Is Fitz in the next man up spot? Most likely. And is Bryson and Rory and some guys in there? Yes, at something. But I just think there's just too much likelihood. And you sold me on the first part of like the Rory Bryson combo that to me just goes to Scottie, or it goes to Rahm and Young, and then they blow up. But the problem is, and this is why people don't always do the full thing. And I know you're not just stopping at the top, but just noting it. This is why it's important when you're figuring out the chalk build is like, it's also what's the next levels. If you go to a Cam Young, I don't know let's use just Rahm Young. I'm just going to do this quickly. Let's do Rahm Young. And then,
as you do that, I can interject with this interesting note. I was just kind of fidgeting with the manual adjustments that I have kind of set up in my ownership sheet. If I were to give 5 percentage points of extra ownership to Rahm, Cam, Xander, Fitz, and Oberg, so 5 percentage points to those 5 players, it would be less impactful to the overall projected salary owned than giving an additional 10% to Scottie. That's the power of Scottie's price tag. And if I end up not putting Scottie around 40%, that's why. It's because I'm saying people are just going to conclude I'd rather play 2 or even 3 of these upper 9K, low 10K guys that like this is as much win. So when we thought back to like, let's compare Scottie right now to last year. To me, the biggest difference between whether or not to play Scottie isn't about Scottie's change in win equity. It's about the change in win equity of these cheaper guys. Where last year was like, if you weren't playing Scottie, you were making a very clear and obvious sacrifice that you were going to have a lot less overall combined win equity in your lineup. And that's not quite the case this year because all of these guys are winning golf tournaments at an elevated rate and continuously putting themselves in contention. So again, like if instead of going Scottie from 31% to 40%, we saw Rahm go to 20, Cam go to 23, Xander go to 22, Fitzpatrick go to 21, and Oberg go to 20, that wouldn't surprise me at all. And we just saw like a huge kind of congregation around that 10K price range.
Yeah. That's another valid point, but I'm just going to go back here for 2 seconds to something else. The point I was going to tell you is if you go look at the Rahm, Young, Højgaard lineup, it's like the chalk nuts. Like it's like what you would expect people to build. What do you think lands in that? It's Ricky Fowler, Siwoo Kim, and Minwoo Lee. Boom.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That is the non-chalk lineup of the other side. Like people can say whatever they want about, and that's why like the 5K guys, when we get there in a bit of like having those conversations, like you can say whatever you want, like, but a 6% or a 7% Alex Fitzpatrick, sure. To the 10 guys around him, you could say one's better than the other, and like that's crazy, et cetera, but 93% aren't playing him, and you can do a ton of different things. You can leave money on the table. You can use him in non-Scotties. You can use him to go away from this build completely. You can use him in a 9K guys and get different. Like there's so many ways that you can get different with any of these low-priced guys. That's why this Scottie conversation was such a big one off the top, because now you're usually good at figuring these out. Let's just use Rahm and Young. We'll leave Højgaard, Fowler, Siwoo, and we'll leave Minwoo for the moment. That leaves us 6.8K with Scottie. Do you think it's more likely that somebody goes down and somebody goes up? Like who am I missing here? Who's the popular 8K guy, if anybody?
That's hilarious because I'm literally doing this as you're speaking, and then you ask that exact question. So it's cool to see how similarly we think about lineups. The answer I was kind of coming to was instead of Minwoo Lee, like you go down to either Keegan or Kitayama, and then that leaves you 69 for Norin or Yella Miraju, and I think that's going to be the build. So it's basically Scottie and Norin, Yella Miraju, Thigala, Mitchell, one of those guys versus Rahm, Cam. Or you could go like Cam and Fitzpatrick becomes, Scottie, and now you get another low 7K guy now. So Scottie and Harris English versus Cam Young and Fitzpatrick. I don't know what the field prefers between those two, but like that's the question that so many people are going to be asking when they build their lineups.
100%. And I will say this too. In that previous version, yes, the Minwoo could have been Keegan. I do believe, like somebody said it earlier, I thought it was funny, knowing the show quite well. And got to give a shout out to my guy, Jenny B, got the 5K shipper last week. Love to see that. Congrats to you. But it was Vince here. Said, my leverage lane, fade insufferable Keegan Bradley. You can't just claim half the U.S. as your hometown. And obviously we talk about that. You see it out there a lot. But just noting it, if he's in that lineup, he fits and leaves $200 on the table, and you could change. That's my point. You're not, change your single guy. Oh, I got a guy that's 5% instead. Sure, you pulled something. People make fun of my lever conversation, but you pulled a lever there. But did you really pull a big enough one for something that's, got even the $200 single entry this week as 1,000+ people? So just quickly thinking about it from that perspective, going back for a second, there's another version. So it still keeps Scottie, Højgaard, Fowler, and Siwoo, but instead of what did I have before in there? It was
Keegan Noren.
You said the Noren or yellow version. That's the Noren yellow with Keegan. That one's going to be popular. But what did I have before? It was Minwoo. And
Minwoo, and then it would be someone.
We didn't have anybody. And that's what I said. So what I did is I went down and put last week's winner in there, who we made a lot of jokes last week about the last name and rating out well and rating out and all that, and then goes on to win the tournament. So that was lovely. But if you put him in, it gets you the Bible Bros. You get Sam Burns, who, by the way, looks like somebody in the 8K. If they get any love, it might be him. Again, might be 10%, might be 9%, 8%, whatever. But in 8K, it kind of looks like the guy there. So just noting it, there's a couple 2v2s, but it's pretty clear that 3 to 4, Scottie, Højgaard, Siwoo, very common. And then one of Cam Young or Rahm or both with Højgaard, Siwoo, also very common. So I don't know if there's any more to add on the chalk build or this conversation, but anything else you got on this? If not, we got to start talking about how to handle that, because that's the biggest question this week is what do you do with that information?
Yeah, the other option that people would have there is to incorporate the 5K range, and you go like Spieth, McCarty. So I think we'll see a lot of variations to the point where I talked about Nick Taylor earlier and Fitzpatrick and Harry Hall, where like all of those guys would end up getting some more ownership, probably like 3 to 5 percentage points minimum more ownership than expected if Scottie ends up 40% instead of the 31%. So that's a really interesting thing to kind of continue to talk through. But as far as where we go from there, like I think the first thing to notice is like we just talked about 2v2s where it was literally Scottie and somebody else versus Rahm and Cam Young or Cam Young and Fitzpatrick. So I think the very first thing to notice when you're building lineups is if you're building a balanced lineup, just steer clear of the 2v2 type lineups and go to like a minimum of 3v3 or a 4v4. So one way to do that is to go really balanced, and instead of, playing 3 or 4 guys under $8,000, you end up with nobody under, or one guy under $8,000 or something like that. So like that's, I think, a very clear and obvious way to pivot off the chalk build, because you're getting so many different spots from all of the chalk variations, where I think, to me, like the number one thing that I don't want to do, and this is especially true, like I'm still trying to earn a ticket into the mega. If I have one lineup in the Mega Millie and I'm going up against all these people who have 10 lineups, 20 lineups, 50 lineups, however many the max is this week, the last thing I want to do is put myself in a position where my lineup is going up against, let's say I have a 4v4 equal. So 4 guys are the same as a bunch of other lineups, and I'm trying to win with that final 2v2, but I'm playing someone who has 10 different combinations of that final 2v2 versus my one. I don't want that at all. I want as many guys in my lineup to be unique versus other lineups so that I don't run into that type of an issue. And I think that's the number one way to do it is just get out of the lineup builds that have to hammer that like 6K range. And the pivot off of that is 1 5K and 1 8K instead of a 6 and a 7 or 2 low 7s, that sort of thing. Because it's just so hard to win those 2v2s. I'd much rather take my chances with a 4v4 where all my 4 are actually good players.
Yeah, I'm going to pause on that for a second too, because I think something very important and just like I think about all the time is like, that's where people get confused, because I know people run into this and DFS Mastermind over at Chip It Nation Discord. It's always a sort of something to come up. We'll say, well, you just said that, Alex, but then I saw your lineup in the mega on the weekend and you had Højgaard in there at 6,500 and they just stopped there. Like they didn't recognize the rest of the lineup and they take it as like, you don't want to be in this combo, but because what you said is perfect. When there's that 4v4 and you're like, okay, Cam Young and Rahm or Scottie and this guy, someone has that. And then so they might even have it in their own portfolio, duplicate, like covered that way, or with a 3v3 that's just as close, the Keegan versus Minwoo. But then also somebody else over here has the other version of it. And somebody else over here has the other, like you've just backed yourself in so many different ways, but people take it as like the one play. Yeah, but then if you're saying to steer clear of that, then that just means I don't want to play Højgaard. It's like not at all what you said. And it's like now you'd be looking at, okay, how can I use someone who's popular, but in a completely different way? And that's where people confuse the situation. Be like, these good undervalued plays on paper going in may not work out. But if they do and they're needed, you're going to still have to think about those factors, not just, okay, one play got there for me. It's the whole process. It's the how, not the who. It's everything that we talk about on this very show. So I don't know if you want to elaborate on that further, but I think that's the key to remember. You had a couple weeks, I remember, where it was like, yeah, Siwoo's popular, but he's going to be the fourth guy in to every lineup, or the third guy in, or fourth guy, fifth guy. I'm going to use him as my last guy in.
Yeah, that's what I did at the Masters.
Yeah.
That's what I did at the Masters. I had Henley and Siwoo as my only 7K players, and that was it. Everyone else was in the 8K or above, and so yeah, it was like that lineup has multiple paths to succeed, and this is what I like about it. Where someone, in my 8Ks, let's say I can't remember what the rest of the lineup was, but let's say 2 of my 8K guys end up like in the top 3, and one of them wins. That's an easy path to success, because now my highest scoring players are beating the highest scoring players in all of the expensive guy lineups, because they literally won. No one can score more than that. But there's also the potential run out where, let's say, my best finisher is 4th place, but then I have all 6 guys in the top 20 or all 6 in the top 30. And the vast majority of, let's say, Scottie lineups, if Scottie goes on to win, are a 4 of 6 or a 3 of 6. Maybe there's some 5 of 6 and a really low 6 for 6. And 2 of the made cuts are outside of the top 40 in a lot of them. I can still beat those lineups because my worst player was just so much better than the typical worst player, even the typical second worst player in a lot of other lineups. So that's why I so often gravitate towards these balanced builds. But the other reason is because they are literally unique builds, and it's harder to find unique structures when you're going to some kind of studs and duds version.
Yeah, there's also many, like the other side of it, because I know we're going to get to it in a second. I want to ask you one more question first, but when Timmy's point comes up, like if we start in the 9s, we had this conversation a couple of weeks ago about like the win equity versus the made cut equity. When you're looking, if you can't get to that win equity that Scottie has, fine, but there's other things that can bust up. Scottie lineups could end up being like, he could be 35% owned, but there might only be a small percentage of Scottie lineups with 6 of 6, because the way the value plays shake out, especially the popular ones, they do horrible and that doesn't work out. And then somebody that's sitting there with a balance, like, well, kind of in that spot where everybody's got like everyone's sitting 20th right now, but I've got a 6 of 6. They all got a shot, and then it firms up. And then those are veterans that have played forever and they're climbing their way to the board. And there's only so many of the Scottie lineups that are even climbing with Scottie now, because it's like all the other people got left behind, and those 6 of 6s aren't filled with the nut 6 of 6s. They're just filled with Scottie and 5 guys that kind of came through that made the cut. So it doesn't always mean that will get there either. So we'll spend more time on that one in a second, but I do want to ask, and I've got a couple other things, but I want to ask you first, after that conversation, as we get to sort of leveraging the chalk build now, did you get any clarity as of now, Tuesday afternoon, evening, on the Scottie ownership? Like, for me, like I just said, it felt like it became a lot clearer that it's going to be probably a little more than we think, but I'm just curious if it's different for you or what you're thinking as of right now.
I got clarity, but in the opposite direction. I didn't get, not the opposite direction, but in a different direction, where I didn't get clarity on what the field is going to do, but I got clarity on what I want to do, because I think Scottie can only get more popular than what we're projecting. And I got some clarity that I think it's already, even at 31% instead of 40%, I think it's already better to have a more balanced lineup than a Scottie lineup. So different way of answering it, but it still gets to like, okay, I know that part of my path to leveraging the common build now is going to be doing so through a non-Scottie lineup instead of a Scottie lineup.
All right, we just covered both our leverage lanes. Is that it? That's the show. Now that we went through that, so
I think people would be very upset if the extent of the leverage lane was fade Scottie Scheffler, because there's a whole lot more buttons you got to press beyond that.
Yeah, it's always interesting though, because even if that is what it was going to be, and just sort of from that perspective, we always try and bring the why to it, and not just like it's not a hot take. It's like you literally applied math and then potential further math that we're expecting to see, that it kind of really doesn't matter, that it's just going to make it even that much more in a situation. And then we applied also like game theory, contest size. And I'll give you some context because I'm going to segue into it now. We'll go into sort of, leveraging that chalk build or leveraging a Scottie build that's popular. I'm going to actually leverage the opposite one. We spend a lot of time on Scottie, but I'll just give you a quick example. If you go to the previous build we were talking about with like Cam Young, Rahm, Siwoo, Fowler, Højgaard, and wherever that landed, Minwoo or Keegan, right? Was where that landed. If you keep Cam Young, if you keep Cam Young, Siwoo, and Højgaard, different tournaments, but I'm talking like 1,000 or less. Just let me give you this quick example. It doesn't even matter who I name, but if you played 3 8K guys in that are all sub 5%, I actually think you can get away with that, even though it kind of is a thing, because it's not the Scottie full version. It's not the Scottie Højgaard versions. It's not the Rahm Young Højgaard Siwoo 4v4 where you're just swapping a 2v2. And I'm considering field size. Buy-in typically will relate to that, but just noting it, I think that's where some people are like, oh, I thought I might be too chalky, but it's like you're on a completely different construction with 3 popular plays, but you're using them in a completely different way. And then also, I'm not just picking the most popular 8K guys that fit. I'm noting that I'm saying like you could fit 3 really low owned 8K guys. And that would be an example where that's how you separate from the people that started with the chalk version and the people that did like Alex said and went to the secondary version. We're like, well, as long as I 2v2, I'm good. No, you might not be. You would truly separate. And you can't have, let's say the 7K range busts and only Siwoo comes through. Well, so many of those lineups are dead now because they've had 2 to 3 7K guys, one being Siwoo, but you've only got Siwoo. And now it was the 8K range that was needed and succeeded, and you've already got 3 of them in your lineup, and it's only a small range to start with. So it's like those little moves, as much as I'm talking about, it's all related to the field you're in, the size, the contest, all the different factors that go into it. But just a quick example, and I would still maybe go further than that myself because I'm a bit more aggressive, but I'm just noting where people confuse it of like, they think they can't play any chalk, or they think you're saying, well, if I'm going balanced, just go everybody under 10%. There's tons of different ways that you can play it from there. So let's keep it moving. Let's go
real quick, Tambo. For anyone watching live, or if you're watching recorded, take note of the time right now, because my leverage lane, I'm going to reference what Tambo just talked about, because I just put in the lineup that he just talked about, because there's a 3v3 kind of example here that fully illustrates the point that I'm going to make in my leverage lane. So just keep this timestamp in mind, because you might want to kind of go re-listen to what Tambo just said when I end up talking about my leverage lane.
Yeah. See, hour 3 mark, I see, and then I'll be, things will be timestamped and whatnot below. We like to do that for everybody if you check it later. So what else do you want to, when it comes to leveraging the chalk build? I mean, I was going to bring it up earlier, but I'll go back to it now because you kind of convinced me on the Rory factor. So it's not just about Rory specifically, but it's just noting a concept that goes with it. So it is, results and how they play out, and also DFS as a whole. But I think another thing that gets confused is like your point, even selling me on the spot of like, okay, actually, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I can see this now. That's fine. But can Rory win this golf tournament? Yes. And this, as does everybody else. And if Rory does, there's a possibility he's needed. And likely in most golf tournaments, when you have the winner, we just talked through how Scottie might not still be needed up there because the way the rest of the lineup shakes out and the chalk and the value that gets plugged into that, and Rory's could be the same. But my point would be, if Rory's needed or he beats Scottie or whatever, and that exists, especially going back to what type of tournament you're in, the $5 with 50K up top, the $25 with $1 million up top, someone is going to have that lineup. So if no matter what you think, and I know Alex is talking fully from a single entry perspective and as a whole, but just like from the perspective, especially if you've got a portfolio, I don't think enough people consider that, where it's like, that's another example of, okay, if I've got Højgaard and Siwoo and Scottie, I'm not just going to drop Scottie to Rory, probably. I'm saying you could. That would leave money on the table, be completely different. Everyone else is that. That's more of like a NFL showdown thing, right? You've got Jamar Chase in for the Bengals. I'll just use an obvious one. And you say, I'm not going to play him. I'm going to go to T. Higgins and leave 3,500 on the table. Or I'm going to go even further than that because I want to be even more unique. Well, that's a small slate, single game, smaller player pool, etc. So you're probably not doing that. But just saying, when people are like, Alex made a good point. If you go to Rory, you kind of got the same as the Scottie lineup. That is true. But it's also true that if that version comes through, you probably need that. So it's like you got to think these things through when you're building. That's when your player takes, or you're like, I've got a ticket to the mega this week. I've only got one. It's my first time ever playing it. I want to go down with my ship. No pun intended to Ship It Nation. You can join free right now if you want to go check it out. Do my best Mayo impression there. No code required. The banner right on the top. Drop the promo in with it. But if you want to go to, I believe in that. Alex, you've talked about this a ton, man. Play a lineup you want to play. Go down with your players and run it. If you think it's Rory week, don't give a shit about the rest. Play Rory and then figure it out because that's what you've decided. But it doesn't mean that both things can't be true, was my point. So people don't do that enough when they're trying to figure it out. Well, someone said it's not the best lineup to play, but you like this player and you want to build your own lineup. So go ahead.
Yeah, the other thing I like about the Rory thought is that, yeah, it's only 1,500 different than Scottie, but remember the kind of build that we were talking about, like trying to get out of, where you're kind of left just choosing multiple players from that, mid to high 7K range, upper 6K range. Well, one way to get out of that range is to go from like Scottie, Fowler, and Minwoo. And the reason why you might want to get out of that range is because you have to get that Fowler or Minwoo decision correct, because there are going to be so many other lineups that instead of Fowler and Minwoo, it's going to be, Spawn and English, or Kitayama and Batia. And someone's going to have the right combination of those players, and it might not be you. But you can get out of that range and out of that, 2v2 over and over and over again competition with people by going to Rory. And now the final two, instead of like so many possibilities where you have to get it right in that upper mid 7K range, that just becomes Burns and Spieth, or Henley and Siwoo, or Henley and McNeely, right? Someone like that, where you're out of the range where everyone has different 2v2s and they're all competing with one another. And now you don't need to be quite as perfect with the two that you actually come up with. And I just generally like that style of build, especially like we talked about, if you're in the mega. It's less important in the $277 single entry because you're not playing against other people who have multiple combinations in that range. And so you don't have to be quite as perfect. Number one, because it's a smaller field. Number two, because everyone only gets one chance instead of multiple shots, where they're building around the same core and then just taking, like maybe they have 4 of the same in 10 different lineups, and those 10 lineups all have different 2v2s, all from 73 to 77. They are likely to have the perfect combination. You with one bullet or not.
Yeah, and I think we did review it a little bit after, maybe it was the week after the Players Championship when Giant Squid won the Mega Millie, and Brandon Adams had a bigger portfolio, and we showed how he played. Wasn't it the Players when Morikawa withdrew at 48% owned in the Mega? Mm-hmm. Right? And it was like, everyone's like, oh, Brandon Adams still won like $400,000 or something. It's like, yeah, he had 50% of his lineups. He was field matched on his 16 lineups. He had 8 Morikawa lineups dead at the bottom. It's the other 8. But what's most interesting to me, and I know people like yourself who actually dig into this stuff and try and learn from this, and you learn from the best and try and apply it to your own stuff. It's like, realistically, it was crazy because the Morikawa lineups were in such great shape versus the field if Morikawa didn't WD. And even if he had success, where most people are like, oh, fish play, or like, what an idiot who plays that donkey chalk at 48%, whatever. It's like, again, it wasn't who he played, it was how he played him, and his other lineups, he played accordingly within a portfolio to be able to apply that. But Giant Squid only had 2 lineups, and he clearly played them both differently and to win. It was like, there was no way. He was not in the 4v4. He was not in the 3v3. It was like, I'm here or I'm there, but I only have 2. And then with his only 2, I say only like it's nothing, but I'm just telling you, like, versus what he could play, he had 2. One was to play this way, one was to play this way over here, but both had shots to the top, and paths needed things to go his way, and they did. So shout out to him and another Millie Maker. I think it's the 7th or 8th or maybe 9th, who knows by now, but one of the best. And that's just a point to be made, is you can learn from what people do in the past. You're not gonna be able to apply the plays, but you are able to apply the concept. So that's the key.
Yeah, I mean, one of the kind of like inspirations for this whole conversation was I did like a big giant strategy note in my Discord about this. Was the round 1 of the NFL playoffs. I noticed one of the guys who won the mega, he had a pretty basic core stack with some of the good values, and then like he had, I think it was 8 different lineups, and all 8 were identical except for the final 2v2. Maybe it was the final 3v3, and he just had so many combinations. And so his combinations included, was like, McCaffrey, which crappy DeMarcus Robinson and the Niners defense, right? And it's like, if you're building a single entry lineup, you are not landing on that combination as your final 3. He had one Niners combination, but that was the one that won. And so if you had the same core that he did, and you had one lineup and he had 8, and your lineup was like, your core was perfect, it was optimal, you still had a very low chance of winning, because he had a huge chance of winning. And like, from that day on, it was like, anytime I'm in a contest where I have one lineup and everyone else has multiple, I am making sure I avoid those final 2v2s, 3v3s, where I'm up against multiple iterations of the same lineup, and I'm making sure that my lineup as a whole is unique. And that's been super, super helpful whenever I've been in that kind of contest. And so, yeah, if this kind of conversation really interests you, I think you'll find that strategy note really fascinating, and definitely a reason to check out the Discord.
Yeah, and I think you said too, like the last part there of like what that sets up. Like I wrote this note a long time ago in my Apple Notes or whatever, and sometimes I go back to these, and people know I'm obsessed. I'm always going back and reading things and coming up with these little things or whatever. But it was basically just a quick note to myself to remind myself, because one thing that comes with majors is softer pricing. We've talked about this all-star pricing. This goes with leveraging the chalk build. So it's right on pace with what we're talking about. But in majors and softer prices events, we can focus less on being contrarian, because naturally the ownership gets spaced out. With a bigger 156 person event where people know less people, or these lazy weeks like I've talked about, the ownership gets more congested, and then it actually makes it easier to pivot off of guys. But we're not saying you don't have to be contrarian, but we're saying, and what you just said reminded me of something actually funny, NFL related as well, as my own leak in my own game that I'm going to be working on for this upcoming season. It's a golf show, but you can apply it to this. I'm going to do it in golf in 2 seconds. In NFL, when the season starts, we have softer pricing, and people go mad trying to like figure it out. And it's like, no one knows anything yet, but we know that looks like bad pricing. So we're going to use the best players, just use it to their advantage. It might just be the stack that they're on that's slightly different. It might be everyone's on a running back and this stack and they flip the build, or it might be everyone's on high priced running backs and they go to lower, but it still allows them to fit the popular stack or the popular guy, but now it fits the quarterback and the wide receiver too. And I'm using NFL because people can relate and like, damn, that just looks like how did I not get to that? It just, they played all the chalk. It's not that. They got a few things different, but they didn't ignore the softer pricing and the lower. They're not trying to pivot just to pivot. And that's what so many people do. Same thing goes here. Like I said, that's what I was trying to explain earlier. People will just go nuts about a guy like Højgaard, especially in like a higher stakes, smaller field and everything. Like, I get it. And there's tons of ways you can get different. But I'm saying, if you really want that play in your lineup and you want to use that, stop thinking about that play and that singular ownership and start thinking about what that can do for your build, and then tie it together with all the things that Blickle just talked about. And I've mentioned throughout the show of like ways that you can use it to your advantage, because you're still not, if you got Højgaard and that's it, but you're not in the 3v3, you're not in the 4v4, you don't have Scottie, you don't have Cam Young, you've got a little bit of a different variation, whatever it looks like to you, what's stopping you from using that? If you still think Højgaard's the option down there, you think he's underpriced by $1,500, why would you not use him and figure it out from there? So too many people get caught up in that of like, oh, I just can't play him because it's X% owned. It's, you got to figure out what he can do. Does he do something for you that does make you feel comfortable? If so, and I'll reverse it quickly just to get the final thought out, is people will go top down instead, and they'll get an awesome top down build. They're like, holy shit, I can't believe it. I just did this magic thing. Like I switched the build. I love what I see in these first 5, but of course it lands on Højgaard, that loser, that donkey chalk. but they're not thinking about how different their lineups, a completely different construction, lower owned options up top. Like there's so many things going in their favor. And they're like, I may as well go Rasmus. And they just they get different again at the bottom. And maybe Rasmus beats them this week. My point being though, you're thinking about it in two different ways. If you're starting with them, keep that in mind. And then you got to think from there. But if you land on them, go back. What do you currently have? Well, shit, I'm already super different. I'm already in a different time zone than everybody else. I'm not on what Blickle talked about with the 3v3s or the 4v4s or all of that. Shit, I can actually play Højgaard, and he clearly projects far and away the best in this spot, and that ownership isn't even going to hurt me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think enough people do that, and I know a lot of people are playing 1 to 3 lineups, and they stumble into that as a mistake and like, should have just played Højgaard. Guess what? You could have just played him. Nothing was stopping you. You just decided because of like an arbitrary thing in a vacuum that you can't, and you could. So anything else you want to add on leveraging the chalk build? That was my value play, softer pricing takes that I wanted to make sure I got in before we get out of here.
No, I agree with that. And there will be more in my leverage lane about that.
All right, let's go to the betting breakdown. I know you had some calls last week. I tailed both of them. It was Ricky Fowler, and not to win the whole thing, but if we were betting, what did he end up finishing? I hope 4th, because I was trying to think how it finished out. What was the final leaderboard last week?
Where did Fowler finish? But
I know
my
the last one, but if we had had him with the T3 and said, no, he got the T2, of course he
T2,
did.
Yeah.
He would have hit that each way because it was like Rose and Spieth. And it was like, why not just get, Fowler? He fits the same mold from that
exact same mold. Yeah.
And that's fine.
Yeah. I'm going. So what were I want to figure out which one I want to talk about. Cause I think the Spieth pick, like he was the one that I said, like, I'm almost ashamed to be talking about it, but it was funny because he kind of showed why we made the bet to begin with, because at the Truist, like that was his best off the tee week in a long time. I mean, he gained 1.25 per round. I'm trying to find. Okay, the Memorial in 2024, he was cut. He gained 1.44. So at Quail Hollow in 2024, Wells Fargo 1.47. That's the last time that he did that well off the tee. So we got what we needed, right? In that regard, he set himself up where if he had a spike week with the irons and or putter, or was good around the green, he was going to be in contention. The problem was it was the only category he actually did well in. He was really bad tee to green, or from fairway through the green, I should say, not tee to green, because the driving was awesome. But like that's what we're looking for with Spieth right now, right? It's the fact that he is literally showing spike weeks in all 4 categories, and he just needs to put them together. He didn't last week, but maybe he does this week. So I'm actually going right back to him now at 125 to 1, and I will give both my outrights this week since it's a major and it's worth it. But Morikawa now available at 55 to 1 over on Bet365 with that 1/5 each way for 3 spots. And I love his outright because there is obviously still injury uncertainty, but the truth is the injury uncertainty just doesn't matter that much for outright bets, because the chance that he's healthy is there. And if he's healthy, he can play well. And on paper, this is a fantastic fit for him. You get the accuracy and approach combo. Only Scottie Scheffler has a higher combined strokes gained driving accuracy plus strokes gained approach than Morikawa does in our estimates. And one of his biggest weaknesses is around the green, which probably isn't going to matter as much here as it usually does. So I love the fit for Collin. Yes, he might still be hurt, but the other thing is, like, when Collin talked about his back injury after the Masters, he didn't talk about the issue being pain and finding a way to swing through the pain or commit through the pain. He talked about just trust that his back would hold up if he did make an aggressive swing. But then he went to the Heritage and he finished 4th, and his approach play was spectacular, which said to me, okay, he's starting to trust things again. Yeah, he was bad in Doral, but that golf course does not fit him at all. So I don't care how he played whatsoever. I care a lot more about the fact that he was healthy enough to go play a course that he knew didn't fit his game. And then he got a week off of rest. Like, I think there's a pretty good chance that he's close to 100%. And if he's anywhere close to 100%, he's got a great chance to win on this golf course. And the market reflects like a fully injured version of himself, not the potentially getting healthy again on a course that really fits him well.
Yeah, which is all that matters too. Like I say, you're getting it reflected just much like we talked about when things are baked in DFS, and the same thing in DFS with ownership. You can have it from that perspective, and different roster constructions, all these factors. But yeah, from a betting perspective, love that call. Spieth also had pretty good celebration. He went back to the go get that last week, but it's tough to do when you're down the board. I mean, maybe he thought he was going up the board, so that's what he was doing. That was the eagle putt, of course, which was nice to see. But yeah, going back to it, never wrong, just early is a common saying in the golf space, especially with golf betting. So I like that call going back to him. One and done. What do we got for this week, and what's available for us to use?
Man, I thought there was a time last week where we were gonna be right back in it since we used Cam last week, but then Cam kind of faded on Sunday, which was very unlike him this year. We can kind of do whatever we want, but I think we need to be contrarian because there are an awful lot of people in really good shape now, given how consistent Cam and Fitzpatrick have been. And, a lot of people have Scottie second place finishes. We have Scottie, Rory, Rahm, Bryson, Oberg, Fitzpatrick, Koepka, Morikawa. My choice, I think, is Fitzpatrick, is like one of the things that I keep touching on, and I think is a really important point when you're thinking through the game theory of one and done at this point, is if you haven't gotten a win from Fitzpatrick or Cam especially, but I'd also throw Rory in there because he was popular at the Masters, their ownership the week of doesn't matter anymore. You are competing with people way ahead of you who can't possibly use him again. So if you're way behind, the easiest way to catch up is to use guys who've already won and make that previous win less important because they win again. And so Fitzpatrick, Cam, Rory, if you've got any of those three guys still remaining, this is a great week to use them because the purse is so high. I think for that reason, Fitzpatrick is probably my favorite choice here. I think he's a really good fit for the course, and we haven't used him yet.
I'm fine with Fitzpatrick. I was just going to say, did we have I remember some conversation around do we go Cam or Rory and then flip it for the following week? But I think if people have, who knows how it goes, but obviously those that have Rory left over, he's in high consideration, even with the live conversation stuff where people are like, oh, but it's the only time people get to play live guys. I don't think people really want to play Bryson here. They got the US Open. For Rahm, they got the US Open and the Open. It's like, I don't know how high those guys are going to be. I don't think people are, super high on the ones that, don't get into all the big events as often, like Brooks making a nice run at Myrtle last week before the crazy story of Brandt Snedeker getting the job done. But just noting it, like Brooks isn't around every week to play. So maybe some people gravitate, but not that many, I think. So to me, it's like Scottie gets pushed. Cam Young still gets pushed, and maybe even Rory a little bit just for whoever has him left over. But did you have any second thoughts? Because we did waver, I think, last week back and forth on Young versus Rory and why we went Young, but out on Rory and in on Fitz is what you're saying.
I mean, I just think, this is when we play Rory, I want it to be at a course where he's taking full advantage of his length. And I don't think he's going to be able to do that here. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but ironically, I think Bryson is one of the best plays this week as well, because I'm in full agreement with you on what you just said, where even though the field is very aware of the play live guys in majors because it's the only chance you get to play them strategy, I don't think he's going to be popular at all this week. He was popular at the Masters. He's going to be very popular at the US Open. He'll be somewhat popular at the Open Championship just because, especially if he does well in one of these majors beforehand, it's going to be people's last chance to use him. They will. But I don't think people are really going to use him this week. I think Rahm will still be a popular pick, but I don't think Bryson will because the US Open narrative is just so strong for him. So I like that thought as well of just saying I might get to lean into the live strategy in major championships with one of the best players on live, one of the two best players, and get him at pretty, intriguing ownership. So I think that's also very much in play.
All right, I'm down to go Fitz. I'm in on that. Probably wrap this thing up in the next 5 or 6 minutes. I will say Aaron said Blickle's point is a good one and probably counterintuitive. Most with only one bullet will likely take less risk, which gets on common build. Very true. Yes. And also want to know, this is one of the number one mistakes. I talk about it in my, my mastermind modules with the My Map modules that I have over on DFS Mastermind, the courses that I go through, everything I've talked about sort of my whole time doing this is the secrets of satellites are part of the secret is when you play satellites, you got to play that way when you get the ticket too, not tense up. It's like when somebody makes a bet and then gets 1/10 of it and is like, should I cash out? It's like, why the hell did you make the bet? Like you're tensing up now for no reason. It's not over. There's 3 full days to go and whatever. And I know I'm exaggerating the numbers, but my point being, when a lot of people play loose in a $9 satellite, wake up or end the day super pumped, like, oh my God, I just won a 555 ticket. And then they go play a 555 ticket horribly because they're like, oh, I can't play like I just did. The way you just won with, you can't play like that? Well, no, it'd be pretty risky, wouldn't it? No, it would not. So that's how you win the actual tournament now. So that would be the way you'd want to kind of keep that in check. Obviously, you can make some adjustments, but just from a grand scheme overview, I like to talk about, that's a huge mistake I see people make. So it kind of goes with that too.
Yeah, I love your call out there on the cash outs. That has to be my biggest pet peeve about the betting industry is when you, especially like, let's say it's an NFL Sunday parlay and you include one bet from the Sunday night game, like, with 100% certainty that if everything goes according to plan, you're going to have to make that decision. And you chose to include the Sunday night prop as well, or the Sunday night bet, knowing that meant that your cash out offer is going to be lower than what you would have made if you just didn't include it. And people still include it and then take the cash out. Yeah. It's like, you knew you were going to have to make that decision. What the hell are you doing? But people do it all the time. And it drives me nuts.
It's the emotional mindset, right? Like they get attached to the money that's not theirs yet, but it could be if they just press this button. And I think there's like, again, honestly, most of them are still bad, but there's like life-changing decisions on some of these big ones for people. Like let's say someone's rolling with like 30 grand of debt. They've got a parlay to win 100K. And this parlay is like a bad cash out at 35 grand, but they're making a life decision at that point. Again, math and us and numbers and most people thinking about like, yes, probably you should still run it. But I at least understand if it's at that level. Like I've seen people use, so you've seen some of these big ones where it's like 500 grand and their cash out is for like 140 grand. It might be 2-3 years salary, maybe more. Like, I don't know. I'm just saying like it could be that. And it's like, I get there's a totally different conversation. From a math perspective, it's still bad, but I understand that's where most cases, but maybe not, maybe other factors.
The criticism in this example isn't of them actually taking the cash out. It's of them placing or adding that leg to the parlay to begin with, knowing that you're going to take the cash out. Cause you might be taking a cash out at like $20,000 when if you just hadn't included that prop, you would have made $23,000 on the parlay instead. You cost yourself $3,000 because you threw that into the end of the parlay without even considering if I end up hitting every single leg except for that one, am I going to have the stones to let it ride, or am I going to want to cash out? Just think about it, right? It's just it's not that hard, especially when you have been doing parlay bets for a while and the cash out option is coming. And you still end up taking it.
That's the funniest part. Yeah. It's all, it's coming in, but it's like, that's not even brought into the original thought process.
Right. Like you didn't get blindsided by this. You weren't surprised that the Sunday night game didn't happen earlier in the day. It's the Sunday night game. Yeah. That the cash out's coming. You're going to take it because it's still a life-changing amount. Why didn't you just not click that one to begin with, and you would have made an extra $2,000?
The best part too is the reactions. And I was like, oh my God, a cash out option. It's like, you legit knew that was coming, but it's like, you're acting like you're super surprised. It's just, you're more surprised that you hit the other legs of it. And now you have a decision to make and the emotions get involved, but it's always fun. We want to have fun with all we do. So we appreciate everybody tuning in and watching this. We of course have our leverage lane to go through still. Alex, I'll let you go first. I'm very concerned we end up similar, but I'm going to try and like at least tie a secondary part to it. But by all means, I guess I will say this, even if we do end up similar, the point would be, this is why it's fun, like doing content on major weeks together, like especially with the Mayo show being involved now too. And we're on the other ones. He's going to have all three of us on all the majors, he said. So it's like, that's where we were seeing it so clearly that day. It's like, it hasn't really changed that. I don't see it where it's at. So it's kind of like, it's just coming together now. That's what's happening.
I mean, we literally finished that show with Pat 4 or 5 days ago. And as soon as we all finished recording, we said like, did it feel like we have like a really good picture of what this DFS contest is going to look like, even though like we don't even have projections from any sites. We don't have ownership, like nothing. And yet it feels like we have a pretty solid idea. So yeah, not surprised that we seem to be seeing it clearly and similarly, but I'm going to try to phrase my leverage lane in a way that's different from what I think you're going to say. And so my leverage lane is going to be trying to find separators as high up the pricing board as I can possibly find and build my lineup through them. And so I'm going to use the lineup that you had previously as an example, where you talked about starting Cam Young, Nikolai Højgaard, and Siwoo Kim. And that leaves the potential for, like, let's say Rahm, Fowler, and Minwoo Lee, something very chalky and something that puts you in that exact scenario that we were talking about trying to avoid earlier, where you are forcing yourself to get that combination of, like, mid 7K guys perfectly correct. And in this case, you'd have all of Højgaard, Siwoo Kim, Fowler, and Minwoo Lee. So you're going to have to get that right. And so, like, one possible pivot off of that build, one way to get out of that range would be to say, okay, I'm going to go Rahm, Straka, and Theegala. So now I'm going Straka and Theegala instead of Minwoo and Fowler. But now the problem with this type of lineup is, look at the quality of your separators. Your separators are now Sepp Straka and Sahith Theegala. I've got no problem with that. Those are good players. They have plenty of upside. They are valid separators. But if instead of going Rahm, Straka, Theegala, you go something like, you're now left with 84.66 for these final three. So you could do something like, let's say you still like Straka. So you're going to leave Straka in, and now you're going to go Spieth and Chris Gotterup. Well, now you have three separators instead of two. And instead of Straka, Theegala, you have Straka, Spieth, and Gotterup as your potential separators. So the quality of player is just a lot higher. Your win equity is a lot higher. And these are the guys that you're relying on to actually get you to the top of DFS leaderboard. So this is one example that you can use of the type of lineup that I'm going to build. But I'm looking at the separating potential in my lineup to be from the best possible players that they can be. So I'm going to explore Rory lineups, Bryson lineups. Morikawa looks like a separator. Hovland, Rose, Hideki, Hatton, even Brooks, JT, Gotterup, as I just mentioned, Spieth, Lowry. Like, I'm looking at this group to start there, and then I can fill out the rest of my lineup pretty much however I want.
Yeah, so it's good. We're not on the same, and it'll be somewhat similar. But I mean, I don't just want to say fade Scottie, because I'm definitely fading Scottie after what we talked about, and I was already in on that part of the conversation. Just the builds end up too similar. It's not just that though. Like, people get it so confused. Like, oh, really? That's pretty risky. It's Scottie. I get all that. It's not even about that. It's, for me, it's a lot of the names you just mentioned. I can't get multiples of them, let alone in some cases even one, and feel as good about it. So when you've got the quality in the 9K range of players that I still believe can come through here, and then you've got the quality of the guys in the 8K range, and we did X amount of builds. We did tons of builds to try and look through this, that you just don't land on them. None of the builds land on them. So that's going to be awesome for getting leverage in a portfolio. That's also going to be awesome to get leverage in a, doesn't matter. I always talk about the $200 single entry on here. So I do have a mega ticket this week, but I'm going to note it just to be clear. So for the $200 single entry, 100K up top, my thing is going to be multiple 8K guys. And the reason I'm going to go that route, and I'll say fade Scottie as an add-on instead of the starting point, is because there's enough guys in just the 8K range alone that it could pick up more of them. There's definitely some 9K guys, but then there's also builds that could be like, I don't know, Cam Young or Rahm or Fitz that jump into this 8K range. But all I'm saying is that's how I'm going to look to differentiate, because we just looked through all these different builds and none of them can really land on that. It just, they don't. And we gave one version that could land on it, and it's with like 3 chalky 8K guys. So there's tons of ways to get different in the 8K range. There's Cantlay, Gotterup, Henley, Spieth, Lowry, Bobby Mack, Ben Griffin. Even if you don't like Neiman, there's Burns, Sepp Straka. Like, there's so many options in there. And I think if you're playing multiple 8K guys, you're going to just naturally be different. But I think what's most interesting is that they can lead you to so many different unique build types, even if you did end up in your portfolio with a Siwoo or a Højgaard or the popular option up top that we talked about. There, almost none of those builds end up in these 3v3, 4v4 categories unless you literally play the highest owned option at every other price point that fits. So just noting that perspective, I think that's kind of the key for me.
Yeah, I love all that. Ours are very clearly similar. I thought what yours was going to be was that you were going to play some of the value chalk and just not all of it. So like whether it was Nikolai, whether it was Siwoo, I thought that's where you were going to go with your leverage lane and then just get different elsewhere, which is why I didn't want to explicitly say that, because like then they would literally be identical. But just to clarify my leverage lane, now that you haven't said that, I am probably playing some of the value chalk, probably Nikolai, maybe Siwoo Kim. I'd be more surprised if I end up not playing Nikolai than if I end up not playing Siwoo, just because he's another $1,400 cheaper. But it's similar to like one of the leverage lanes that we often used in the NFL season was quote unquote flipping the build. Like, let's say the field was, paying up for Christian McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson. And we'd say, well, okay, I'm going to go to the value running backs, and then I'm going to pay up for AJ Brown and Jamar Chase or something like that. Yeah. This is a similar idea where most of the field is picking their favorite plays up top, either Scottie builds or loading up on Rahm, Cam, Schauffele, Fitzpatrick, and Oberg. And what I'm saying is I'm going to differentiate up top instead. Mm-hmm. And now, instead of having to find a way to get different from the field by going off Nikolai Højgaard, who projects significantly better than everyone around him, to Keith Mitchell or Aaron Rye or Sahith Theegala or Ricky Castillo or Ryan Gerard, now I can just play the best plays down there instead of feeling the need to find separators there. And the result is I don't feel like I'm sacrificing a ton in terms of like how good the best player is in my lineup, because when you look at like Rory or Bryson, like obviously those guys, Collin Morikawa or even Fleetwood or Hovland and Rose, like those guys have the same ceiling the guys up top have. They can absolutely contend. They can absolutely win. Now the quality of my value play is significantly better, and the quality of my separator is significantly better. Just a little bit of a clarification there of what my leverage lane really is.
I think the NFL thing relates because most people play PGA DFS play NFL too, but you said it like it's different because that's positional, right? If two people are paying up at running back, you're still getting 2 pay-ups. You're just doing it at wide receiver. In golf, That's the beauty of it. There's 2 pay-ups in our example of like Rahm and Young that are popular. They're all the same position though. They're a singular golfer in a 6-person salary cap based game lineup, etc. So it's like you are not pivoting from the 2 popular running backs in Rahm and Young to 2 popular wide receivers, but you're able to say, yeah, well, they're going to be 20-something%, let's call it. And I can get Morikawa with injury concern and Fitzpatrick, who's been winning everything lately, at a better course fit that I see. And I'm different, even though I'm spending the same amount up top. I'm just different because that's where my separators lie.
Yeah, it's kind of like if, let's say there was a really cheap chalk stack, and then the whole field was using that cheap chalk stack and then going to a really popular McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson. And I'm saying, instead of going to McCaffrey and Bijan Robinson, I'm then paying up for a contrarian Saquon Barkley and Jahmyr Gibbs. It's like, obviously those guys can get me 40 points each and break the slate. And if they do, I now have the highest probability cheap stack. And so I'm relying on like as good of the highest quality players that I possibly can, who also give me the potential to separate.
Yeah. And even in those lineups you said earlier, like in the football side of things, people can still play the cheap chalk tight end to make that work. I still want the 2 pay-ups. I'm just going in a completely different direction, but the cheap tight end, I'm not moving off of them. That's Højgaard or Højgaard this week. Like you talk about him down low. So, all right, let the people know what else you got going on, man, where they can find you. It is a major week. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We're excited, obviously, as you can tell, for this major. We'll be back again next week to our regular time, Wednesday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern for the, what is it, the CJ Cup and Byron Nelson? Yeah, but this is the major first. Let's get through the major first. Hopefully some big weeks for people watching or for ourselves here. But Alex, let the people know where they can find you. What else you got going on this week?
Yeah, last thing I want to mention this week is like, this is a spectacular underdog and props week, because we're going to get some hole scores, and there are going to be some holes on this golf course where like one day the pin was in a really easy location and the next it's perfectly guarded by the greenside bunker, or one day it's perfectly guarded and the next day it's in the middle of the green and in a funnel spot, where you're going to see some huge swings in scoring average on particular holes from one day to the next. And the sites that are offering hole scores like Underdog and certain sports books, they're not going to see that kind of thing coming. So I'm going to be hammering away at props all week in the Discord. And a reminder to everyone, you can find my Discord through my Twitter at Alex Blickle1 and use promo code LEVERAGE for 10% off forever. So it's not just 10% for your first month. It's every single time your subscription renews, you still get that 10% off.
Yeah, you know what you should do? Like, if you're not in the Discord, first of all, that's what you should do, watching this and get in Alex's Discord. But I would say you should buy a URL, like go on like Namecheap or something, whatever you use, GoDaddy. Some people use GoDaddy. Buy like a crazy URL that you like and just have it forward directly to your because then it's so much easier. It's like it can go there and it's like, boom, it'll just land on your page and people can get in. But you could have like a sick URL that's just so easy to say and use, and then boom,
I like that.
Blickscore.com, and it just forwards to your page where people go sign up. It's just so much easier. But yeah, man, if you're not in Alex's Discord, definitely get in there. There's a ton of money to be made in different ways each week. If you guys want to get in over at Ship It Nation, we are celebrating our 3-year anniversary is this Friday, May 15th. But with the major week, we want to celebrate. Everybody likes early gifts. A lot of places with good deals this week. Most people use a major to promote their best sales promotion of the year to make money. We are giving it away for free. So you can just go to shipitnation.com, click the banner at the top, no code required. You can check out all access content for the week, and that gets you in for free. You can cancel it anytime. It's just noting that when you get in, you do have to set it up, but you'll be in the Discord. You'll have access to everything. And to Timmy Dub's question he brought up earlier, I'll just bring this back for 2 seconds. One thing that I'm going to do, and I know we don't have it set up for this and it's old data and all this yet, but obviously the win equity will be a lot different with Scottie in the field. And this, everybody has different numbers, but we were using our data. You would be able to start to build lineups from this perspective. You're like, okay, look, and I'm just doing what I do, but you're like, okay, last week, not results oriented, just saying like what fits. Like I'm just using cheaper guys that fit lineups that you're like, okay, that's kind of what I have. Now I've got 18,200 left. If I put Cam Young, what does that land me with? It's 8,100. Well, these are all high win equity guys. I'm just using an example of what you can do. And then you said, okay, I got Sepp Straka and Spieth. My process is to look at the projections, look at different factors. Okay, I like Sepp. And you could do that. And then you'd see I've got nothing. That's my hand build for the week. And then you could compare off of that. But the point being, a 10-8-8 with 3 7s, you can see there is some separation. Not much, to be honest, in this one, because I kind of picked the best of the best. But just noting it, you would see your projection. You'd see what the ownership looks like. You'd see everything. That's what you can do with the Stone 2.0. And that is free to check out this week. Again, just go to the site, click this. You'll be in right away. All right. Good one as always, Alex. I love talking to the majors. Love talking to the shows in general with you. I think there's a lot of good nuggets and tidbits and information that we brought out there. So good luck to everybody this week. Appreciate you all for watching. Make sure to hit that thumbs up on the way out. For Alex and for myself, ToeTagginTambo, good luck this week. Let's ship it.